He's supposed to be providing testimony in his own corruption trial very soon, in 2 months, less than 2 months now. And he's trying everything to try and show that he's tough to his own Israeli base. But that strategy so far is really raining missiles down on his own people.
Now, a drone launched from Lebanon hit Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's holiday home in the northern town of Caesarea earlier today. Netanyahu was not in the vicinity and no casualties were reported. Well, fighting between the Israeli army, Hamas and Hezbollah has shown no signs of abating this week, despite some hope that the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the man who oversaw the October the 7th terror attacks, would lead to a decrease in hostilities. On Thursday, Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to continue the war until all of the hostages taken by Hamas were released. Noga Tarnopolsky is an Israeli-Palestinian journalist based in Jerusalem, and she joins us now. Noga, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Noga, what has been the fallout for the people of Israel after Thursday's events, and particularly after that speech from the Prime Minister?
Well, it was a very, kind of jubilant speech in a way. The getting Sinwar was one of Netanyahu's principal aims and one of the war aims since the attack of October 7th last year. And I have to say that there are a lot of critics in Israel, principally retired generals, who have been very, very wary of this sort of triumphalism all along, because history shows in this region that when you decapitate a terror organization, its next leader is all too often, even more vicious. Sinwar himself is an example of that. He came to lead Hamas after Israel bumped off his predecessors. So there has been a concern about it. But I want to return to your introduction because I think we should stop a moment. Hezbollah today managed to hit the private home of the Israeli Prime Minister. The extent of the security failure on Israel's part that allows something like that to happen is astonishing. And the Prime Minister, we have had so far no confirmation from the Israeli side that this happened, but it does appear absolutely that it did happen. The Prime Minister appears to have been at that residence. It's a kind of a luxury villa on the seaside in Caesarea. Very, very plush, very, very wealthy area. It's his private home. It's surrounded by almost, turrets, walls. It's the site of massive protests against the Prime Minister every weekend. The fact that Hezbollah had the ability not just to shoot a targeted missile and hit his house, but that there wasn't protection against it is just astonishing. Netanyahu has released 2 videos since then, I think to show that he's alive and unhurt. He apparently was at his Caesarea villa until sometime around 3 a.m., is what we're hearing. And then for reasons unknown, in his entire cavalcade took off for Jerusalem. So he was actually in Jerusalem when this happened. And he's released 2 videos to show that he is alive and undeterred.
Is that perhaps signs that the IDF are overstretched? Or is that, as you were saying, a sort of a very worrying just failure of national security?
It's a really good question. The Israeli army has not said a single thing today, except there was a statement. The entire Israeli north is under constant attack all this morning. You have millions of Israelis in bomb shelters this entire day thus far. The Israeli army did release a statement 45 minutes ago saying that until then, 180 projectiles, meaning missiles and drones, had been fired by Hezbollah and crossed into Israel. So that means that they actually fired more. Some didn't make it across because some were intercepted. Israel's under a massive barrage. I mean, what it does mean, among other things, is that Netanyahu's strategy or lack thereof for this war is offering Israelis a life of misery. I don't know how to stress that enough. It's not just the fact that his house was hit is a massive security failure, which I hope will be studied. It may be that the army is overstretched. It may be that the army still, despite the catastrophe of October 7th, 2023, doesn't yet fully grasp the real ambition and capacities of its enemies. Failure of imagination. But the fact of the matter is that a third of this country right now is either an internal refugee or, cowering in bomb shelters. And so what you see is a very unpopular prime minister. He's supposed to be providing testimony in his own corruption trial very soon, in 2 months, less than 2 months now. And he's trying everything to try and show that he's tough to his own Israeli base. But that strategy so far is really raining missiles down on his own people.
Noga, I was also wondering whether, looking at Gaza, you can shed a little bit of information on an article that appeared in the Times of Israel. This reported that almost a third of lawmakers in the Prime Minister's party were participating in an event that its motto was preparing to resettle Gaza. The idea that the way forward with Gaza would be to get Israeli settlers to start settling in the Gaza territory. What can you tell us about that event? And also, how significant is it that a third of the Prime Minister's party believe that Gaza is there to be settled in?
Well, obviously, I think that is quite significant. It's hard to know. The Prime Minister's party in total has less than around a quarter, I believe, of the seats in the Israeli parliament. The Prime Minister's party has about 32 seats. So a third of that, I think 8 or 9, if I'm not mistaken, ministers or legislators from his own party.
10 of them. Yeah, but 10 of the 32.
Yeah, there've been some discussion about that. But there are also, more significantly maybe, his coalition is made up of his party and then a collection of either kind of ultra-Orthodox, ultra-religious sectorial parties and extremist parties that were, basically made up of one of them a convicted former, a guy convicted of hate crimes and terror associations, really extremist, violent, nationalistic people who were kept out of the Israeli public sphere until Netanyahu brought them in. Again, going back to his trial, no one else would sit with him as an indicted criminal, not yet convicted, and so he brought in the sort of politicians who would join him. And almost all of them, meaning a huge majority of his coalition, representatives of his coalition, will be attending this conference. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, says out loud and openly in English to the Americans and to the rest of the world that, quote, Israel has no intention of occupying or resettling Gaza. But what he's doing inside Israel is allowing a major part of the population to at least fantasize that it's possible, to believe that it's possible.
Okay.
Now, yeah.
Noga, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there only because time is against us. But as ever, thank you so much for giving us all this time. I really appreciate it. Noga Tarnopolsky.